South Africa will be placed on a 3-year probation under AGOA due to its reluctance to offer reciprocal treatment. And the US, of course, is seeking access to the country's very lucrative poultry market. What exactly is the genesis of this trade dispute between these two economies, and can it be resolved before AGOA is renewed? We'll be answering those questions in the course of this bulletin. Welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. I'm Ramanyang. Here's what's coming up. Kenya's telco giant Safaricom is entering the home entertainment market. It's looking at 2.4 million homes. And business is picking up along the shores of the Nile, at least in Cairo. Now then, let's start in South Africa. Talks with those countries' officials over America's Sub-Saharan African Trade Preference Scheme, better known as AGOA, are in crisis. The two nations are struggling to resolve the issue of American access to the South African poultry market. As a result, South Africa may now face a 3-year probationary period under the AGOA renewal law, which is currently being considered in Congress. Our starting point tonight is Washington, D.C., with CCTV's Daniel Rangers.
Since last August, the US and South Africa have been trying to reach an agreement opening the door to limited US chicken sales to South Africa. The American poultry industry is frustrated that South Africa has shut it out for 15 years. Even as AGOA has allowed duty-free access to many South African products.
Citrus industry, for the textile industry, for the car industry. And South Africa's benefited with billions of dollars of exports. And then we turn around and we want to ship some chicken, which is not a very significant amount, actually.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act is slated for renewal for another 10 years. But a draft of that law currently being considered would make an exception of South Africa by putting it on a 3-year probationary extension. Policy insiders say the US trade representative would have to report to Congress every 6 months on progress in these disputes. South Africa's ambassador to the United States says this move is beneficial.
They have made it sure that they may move an amendment on the floor that will give South Africa 3 years to continue in AGOA. And I think it's quite a victory, because we're not out of AGOA. That will give us a time also to negotiate and finalize these other issues which are remaining.
US trade analysts say if these provisions are enacted, it will lead to a serious erosion of investor confidence in South Africa. That's because it would introduce new uncertainties for export giants like German car makers BMW and Mercedes-Benz.
It clouds the future. We don't know what the future of the US-South Africa trade relationship will be. And that creates question marks in the minds of investors, and it will encourage them to look elsewhere.
At stake is around $3 billion of South African products to the US, 70% of all non-energy related trade within the AGOA scheme for sub-Saharan Africa. Trade experts here say because South Africa plays a pivotal role in the supply chain of neighbouring countries, particularly in the auto sector, these uncertainties could have knock-on implications for them as well. Daniel Rangers, CCTV, Washington.
Zimbabwe, on the other hand, is being forced to import enormous quantities of grain after yet another failed harvest. Now, you see, once upon a time, agriculture was a mainstay of the nation's economy. Zimbabwe used to be a net grain exporter. But declining farming sector output is having a detrimental effect on Zimbabwe's GDP and employment levels. Farai Mokutuya filed this report.
It's become a recurrent cycle in the southern African country, whose agricultural output has shrunk due to a combination of erratic rainfall and poor farming methods. This season, more than a third of the staple maize crop was wiped out by poor rainfall, and now millions will be required to avert a disaster. Private millers have already imported 600,000 tons, and now a further 700,000 tons is being brought in by government, draining the national reserves. It's likely to have an adverse effect on the whole economy.
When you talk of GDP growth, one element which has an impact on the growth of an economy is the import-export relationship. And with Zimbabwe's import bill continuously rising above the export, what it means is we have to continue revising the growth targets.
Zimbabwe's economy is projected to grow by a marginal 1.5% this year. Perennially decreasing agricultural output may also push up unemployment rates over time.
If you look in terms of jobs data, you know that agriculture is the biggest employer in Zimbabwe. in terms of employment figures. So what it means in real sense is quite a number of individuals who lose their jobs within Zimbabwe's farming and agro-processing industry.
Farming used to be the mainstay of Zimbabwe's economy. The country was widely referred to as the region's breadbasket, but in recent years has relied on grain imports from its neighbors. This year, northern neighbor Zambia registered a record maize output and is expected to be the source of the bulk of Zimbabwe's imports. Farai Makutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's turn now to the UK's general election. David Cameron's Conservative Party has won the slimmest parliamentary majority there in 4 decades. The latest data shows the Conservative Party has won at least 330 seats in the country's parliament, surpassing the 326 needed to command an absolute majority in the House of Commons and form a government. Now, Mr Cameron had promised Scotland a lot more devolved powers. He said he would also be pressing ahead with a referendum on the country's membership of the European Union. Analysts say the result is likely to see a continuation of the government's austerity programme with further cuts in public spending. In the wake of these results, the Liberal Democrat leader and previous Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg has resigned as party leader. Labour Party's Ed Miliband also resigned after losing, of course, the election. Let's get the latest details now from Kelly Lemon. She's live in London. She has been following the results as they come through from this election. Kelly, SNP's effectively kicked Labour right out of Scotland. The Conservatives have effectively garnered a majority in Parliament, a slim one, but still a majority nonetheless. These are all things that pre-election polls missed. What exactly happened here?
Well, absolutely. It's come as a complete shock, and that's really one of the learnings from this election. Don't trust the polls. According to the polls, Labour were running a successful campaign, and some of the pundits today say how hard it was for Ed Miliband to adjust his campaign as he thought it was hitting home. The first sign that maybe the polls weren't as accurate as we thought was when the first exit poll came out last night, pointing at a Conservative majority. Now, many MPs saying today they hope that the exit polls are accurate, but never really expected to win as well as they did. This time yesterday, we were all saying it was too close to call, but it's rather a different picture 24 hours on.
Indeed, certainly we're not seeing any pollsters resigning yet in contrast to party leaders. But let's talk about the Conservatives. They clearly missed their target of cutting down migration to, let's use the phrase they used last time round, tens of thousands. It's still one of the party's aims, however. So what exactly will they do different this time round?
Well, they have changed the word target to aim, which is quite a big distinction and gives us some insight as to how hard the Tories think this task will be. One of the challenges David Cameron had in this campaign was immigration, given their lack of success in the last term. This time, though, the focus is shifting to the rights and responsibilities of immigrants when they arrive on British soil. During the campaign, Mr Cameron talked about withholding services like the NHS care and benefits until somebody coming into the country has paid into the system, so to speak. Now, the Conservative Party have a majority that now that they have a majority, rather, we'll be expecting a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of details.
Indeed. The Conservative government also did promise to shut down bogus colleges as part of the pre-election pledges. But given the sheer amount of students from other countries, Africa, India, elsewhere around the world that the UK does attract, how is it possible for them to essentially close down these bogus colleges, but without affecting the flow of students who come into the UK every year?
Well, in one of his live debates, Mr Cameron was actually keen to point out that there have been successes within the government with shutting down these programmes, although he did admit that, reforms were needed and that was something he was going to look at. Now, there's no escaping that even though the Conservatives have won with a slim majority, immigration was a key issue in this election. And one of the other factors to consider is, of course, the membership within the EU. David Cameron was adamant that there would be a referendum on his watch, and that, of course, will impact the UK's policy on immigration.
Indeed. Finally, quite a few UK firms having quite a bit of business across Anglophone Africa. Vodafone comes to mind. Barclays, of course, is another company as well. They all have a pervasive presence across the continent. What should we expect on foreign economic policy from David Cameron over the next few years? More of the same? A reduction in the UK's engagement with the rest of the world?
Well, putting the issue of the European Union to one side for the moment, voters surprised everybody today by making a very clear choice, and that's for stability. Talk of hung parliaments and coalitions clearly impacted voters, and we're seeing a clear theme come through. And that's one of the reasons sterling and UK equities rallied on the news. So in terms of foreign policy, pundits say Cameron will be keen to keep the stable framework he promised, and as he says, just continue the plan that they've already began implementing.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for that. That's Kelly Lemon live in London. We'll certainly be keeping tabs on that story moving forward. Now, let's move on to South Africa. Scores of African migrants are waiting to leave Africa's second largest economy, especially in the wake, of course, of April's wave of xenophobic and fairly brutal attacks. African foreign nationals in the country were targeted in that wave of violence, which left at least 7 people dead. As Sumitra Naidu reports, foreigners are now calling for tougher laws in South Africa itself to prevent a recurrence of this xenophobia.
The xenophobic violence spread like wildfire through many parts of Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Mobs behind the attacks were intent on driving out foreigners. Zambian businessman Mulenga Murad was just passing through on a 3-week business trip to South Africa when he was attacked in Alexandra Township, just across from the elite Sandton CBD.
One guy had a gun, the others they had the machetes and knives. They gave us 2 options: to surrender so that they can clean us of our goods, or they knife us. They took my money, I'm talking of 28 plus, 20 minus or plus or minus 28,000 rand that I sold over a period of 2 weeks I've been here. And they destroyed my other remaining stocks, about 16 bags or so, 50 kg.
Murad is an agricultural trader. He was given a permit by the South African government to trade in the country. On the eve of his flight back to Zambia, thugs attacked him and stole $3,000 in cash.
I don't even know how I'm going to recover because, you know, I had other bills to pay early this year for my 2 university student brothers of mine. I'm the breadwinner at home. So this is my first trip for the year. And part of the money I used, I had to borrow some credits from people, you know. I don't know I'm going to pay all that back.
With unemployment at 25%, many say it's a fight for jobs.
They think maybe as we are using magic to make money. It's not magic, it's just hard work and an idea. A business idea first thing, and then you go for it. You can make a living.
Murad says South Africa needs to be tougher on criminals who are perpetuating xenophobic violence and destroying South Africa's reputation.
In places like Zambia, it's very easy to do business. You are protected by law. No one can come just walking in a shop and ransack you. The law is very, very strict on that. And the foreigners are very much protected. Though it's not too much business. As for South Africa, there's too much business, but very risky. The law is there, but you know, it doesn't work.
Now Murad has no money to return to his home country, Zambia. He's now waiting for the South African government to repatriate him. Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
Right, then a quick run through markets here for you. Only one set of green numbers coming through on the board, and that is, of course, on the JSE, up by over 100 basis points in trading today. That said, some material information coming through as well. This is out of South Africa. The power utility Eskom is asking for a 12.61% rise in power tariffs. That's according to NERSA out today. NERSA, of course, remember, has already approved a 12.69% hike in prices for the 2015-2016 fiscal year. We'll be in South Africa next. Industrial unrest is once again crippling work at Medupi. And the giant East African telco Safaricom is getting into the home entertainment market. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
This report by the African Green Revolution Alliance says climate change will slash food output. Within the next 30 years, the number of malnourished people in sub-Saharan Africa could jump nearly 40%.
Welcome back to the program. Now, over the last couple of years, it's been virtually impossible to talk about the Medupi power station in South Africa without the word delayed in the exact same sentence. Now, the latest delay has come about due to a strike. Angelo Coppola spoke to Roman Crooks, the project manager at the vast 4.8 gigawatt facility, to see what solutions are on the table.
When it comes to labour disputes and strikes, management and labour are always at loggerheads. But when management is a subcontractor and the project owner operates at arm's length, it gets complicated. NUMSA is the majority union at Medupi, and it says Eskom can't sit on the fence.
I would disagree with the view that we're sitting on the fence, and I think Eskom is quite adept at dealing with very complicated problems in the background. And I would say that it's gone largely unnoticed, but Eskom is highly intolerant of situations like this, to such a degree that when we are dealing with our contractors in many instances are very uncomfortable because we are very tough taskmasters.
The project has been delayed because of strikes before, and the time can't be caught up.
We're talking a good 2.5 months that are lost to schedule. So I think if one was to ask, is this a serious strike? This is a serious strike. It's 1/6 of a year that's been lost. And if we're measuring progress in days, this is a big impact.
Eskom is under pressure to get this project back on track. And while Unit 6 is running optimally, and this week added 700 megawatts to the national grid, it's the rest of the power station construction that is suffering.
And the sadness is there is very little, if any, work taking place on those units, simply because we don't have the full workforce back on site. So the time that we're losing on those units in terms of construction, if not well mitigated, will just be added to the end of the construction program.
It's complicated, and Eskom say they don't want to step into a legal quagmire if they get too involved in their contractor's business.
They say that there are two sides to every single argument. In this case, there are probably three. And as the owner of Medupi, the actual project, you would think that Eskom would step in and intervene to get this resolved so that power can be supplied to South Africa's grid. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now then, East Africa's largest telecom company by revenue, Safaricom, has launched a new set-top box in the market targeting the traditional free-to-air television market, but also those among you who prefer to consume your content on demand. Subscribers will be able to use Safaricom's data network to get access to several HDTV channels as well as on-demand content. This device can also provide a domestic Wi-Fi hotspot. Now, Safaricom hopes to reach an estimated 2.4 million households in Kenya that have access to digital TV sets, but currently are not using set-top boxes at all. Now, mobile data posted the fastest growth among all of Safaricom's business lines in the last fiscal year. Even with a 59% year-on-year growth, however, data still accounted for less than 10% of the company's total revenue. Pushing up data consumption, however, will definitely require good content. So, is Safaricom in talks with Netflix or Iroko TV, perhaps? Those are questions I put to Safaricom CEO earlier today.
I don't think that if someone wants to crack into a system, it's not about geolocation. You know, you can sit in Russia and crack into a system in the United States. Yeah. That's the nature of cyber. So I don't think that there's any greater risk. In fact, I think we have built more security around this new platform and access to the platform than we had in the previous one. And cybersecurity is something which is occupying the minds of CEOs around the world. I was in Los Angeles last week, and you know, there was a session that I attended, which is, you know, what keeps CEOs awake, and it's cybersecurity.
And for you especially, it's
absolutely, because I've not just got a mobile network to deal with, but I've got a lot of money that's sitting there. So it's something that I pay a lot of attention to.
But isn't there an element of legal risk within the Kenyan jurisdiction? I mean, getting cases through the court system is an absolute nightmare over here. The number of
yeah, I mean, the trick is to try to prevent it in the first place. Don't wait until you've got to take a case through the court. And so you need to build firewall after firewall. You have to make sure that your access controls are in place and they're operating to, you know, to FBI standards, if you like.
Moving back to the question of data, though, I remember sitting in one of your briefings. This was about, what, 3 or 4 years ago, and we spoke about the move into data, the move into providing content. And now we're seeing you move in that direction with the deal between Safaricom and Bamba TV? What's the rationale for that deal?
For us, it's a data play. You know, we don't have fiber in the ground, not in any kind of volume in Kenya. Not us, not our competitors. But if you're in a household, how do you get broadband access? And you know, we believe that if you can put a router in a TV decoder or a set-top box, and then if you can put a SIM card and you can put a big data bundle, and it can go up to 50 GBs and deliver that wirelessly. You know, we are in Mombasa and Nairobi, we now have pretty much full coverage on 4G or LTE. That gives you pretty impressive speeds. On an empty site, it will give you 100 plus Mbps.
And that's more than enough to actually deliver HD content fairly straightforward.
Oh, absolutely. You know, with 4G, there's no more buffering. And we think that there's an opportunity for us to partner with people like Bamba TV to start to deliver video on demand, because 4G will be able to will let you do that. It's going to be very difficult to put fiber to the home in many homes in the country. If you remember that between 70 and 80% of households don't have grid electricity.
Yeah.
So we think a wireless solution could be a good solution for Kenya.
Will you get into the content business yourself?
You know, you should never say never, but right now we'll adopt the same approach we've done with banking, where we say we want to partner with people. And Bamba TV is a great partner, ADN is a great partner, so we'll work with them to make sure that we can deliver their content for them through our box, and at the same time deliver data solutions for our customers.
Is a deal with the Netflix a possibility at some point? Because there are plenty of people over here who already have access to Netflix through obviously legal means, but they have it anyway. So that essentially points to latent demand. Why not just essentially give them a legal option to get out there and say, yeah, we want to be able to watch Orange is the New Black on Netflix?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely right. We think customers, you know, Kenyan customers really adore local content. That's for sure. But you know, if you look at the output from Nigeria, they accept those. I believe firmly that there are a lot of customers who want international content. And so companies like Netflix, we are in pretty advanced conversations with many of them.
Including Iroko TV, perhaps?
Including Iroko TV.
Part of my conversation there a little earlier with Bob Collymore. Now, quick run through commodity prices. Let's see what your money has been doing on this front. Crude oil up around $70 a barrel, but pared back some of those gains a little later on. Now we're looking at about 65, 67 or so dollars to the barrel. But also keep in mind that the pace of the decline in the rig count in the United States, the Baker Hughes rig count, has actually declined quite a bit, down 11 to about 894 rigs. This, however, still is the 22nd straight week of declines across the pond. Business is starting to pick up along the shores of the Nile in Cairo. We'll tell you why and how next.
And I think Nelson Mandela forced us to really examine what these issues are: forgiveness, equality, justice, freedom. Are we free? Are we not? What does it mean to forgive? What does it mean to embrace your enemy? What does it mean to say to your enemy, I forgive you? What does it mean to say, I reconcile with you?
Welcome back to the program. The stunning scenery along the Nile, from Aswan to Luxor, Cairo, and right into the Mediterranean, is quite breathtaking. We've been actually doing a series on that this entire week. But of course, the political turmoil that has been in that country since January 2011 has severely damaged Egypt's once vibrant tourism sector. As Yasser Kim now reports, however, the political stability has increased, and traders in the coastal town of Ras El Bar are hopeful about their future prospects.
After snaking thousands of kilometers north through Africa, the Nile finally reaches the sea, here on Egypt's coast. final stretch of the river brings us here to the small town of Ras Al Bar. In ancient times, it gave refuge to the sailors from the Mediterranean Sea. But now it has a different type of visitor, Egyptian tourists. It's low season here. It's actually pretty cold, and the town looks tired. All the action is on the river. Fishing boats heading out to sea or back. But during the summer months, the population can increase tenfold, and Ras Al Bar comes alive. Even in the low season, nighttime is the busy time. This is one of many restaurants on the river's edge, and this restaurant cooks shawarma. Shawarma is basically meat wrapped up in pancake, which is very delicious and keeps a steady flow of customers throughout the year. ممكن بقى واحد سندوتش شاورما باللحمة من ايديكم الحلوين؟ Saeed Azmi is among thousands who make their living catering for visitors to Ras Al Bar.
وايه رايك بقى في البلد؟ يعني دلوقتي الظروف عامله ازاي؟ شايف ان
لا في تحسن طبعا مستمر ملحوظ وموجود عن الاول بكتير، يعني حتى احسن من المراحل اللي فاتت بكتير قوي. التحسن ظاهر وملحوظ عند كل الناس.
طب الحمد لله.
يعني ايام الثوره والحاجات دي كان في قلق، كان في خوف. كانت ناس بتخاف تخرج، كانت ناس بتخاف تيجي كتير، وكان في مع قطع الطريق كان في اي مشكله كانت بتحصل كانت بتقطع الطريق العمومي بتاع راس البر، فكان ده بيأثر برضه علينا هنا. احنا شفنا ايام في الثوره هنا ايام صعبه جدا. يعني أنا محل زي ده كان بيقفل الساعه 9 من قله الشغل. هو مع الاستقرار كل مدى يعني في تحرك، يعني مع الاستقرار الوضع الامني
Now it's time for my shawarma. It's ready. Let me see. Hot and tasty. Beautiful.
Tourism is critical to Egypt's economy. 1 in 6 of the entire workforce was involved in tourism not so long ago. The Nile is a central attraction. Recent political troubles have been bad for business. The number of tourists in 2013 was 5 million less than in 2010. But Egypt's hoping the visitors will return. Security is being tightened, and there's a drive to promote Egypt, particularly in China and other Asian countries.
Ras Al Bar is an attraction better known to locals rather than foreigners. But as a place where the Nile flows into the sea, this is considered one of the most significant meeting points in Africa.
And of course, if you did miss any of that entire series, you can check it out on YouTube. That's youtube.com/CCTV Africa, and you'll find the entire series from start to finish. Quick run through currencies here for you. We're essentially wrapping up this week on currencies with the status quo, except of course for the South African rand getting some gains because US jobs data was relatively lackluster. The Kenyan shilling, of course, still very much under pressure. April's wave of demand for corporate dollar demand, of course, might essentially have tapered off a bit. So let's see how that plays out later on in May, but we're still well above 95 shillings to the dollar on the interbank market. And that's where we'll leave it now for this edition of Global Business. As always, we welcome your feedback, your thoughts, your ideas, story ideas and so on. globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com is the email to use. And of course, as always, there's a constant stream of content coming your way on Facebook and on Twitter. Thanks for watching. See you on Monday.